when I came to after the flatline was a very strange feeling because I could hear all the doctors in the room, but I couldn't see anybody, and I couldn't actually speak. And so I could hear them, and I heard them say, "All right, we've got a heartbeat now, and we have this." And I wanted to be able to say, "All right, guys, I'm back." I had the awareness without being actually able to say anything.
You are listening to 5 a.m. podcast. Your morning motivation starts here.
Welcome back to the 5 a.m. podcast. Sometimes life forces a transformation upon us in the most dramatic ways. Our next guest knows exactly what it's like to have everything look perfect on the outside while running on empty on the inside. Chris Woods rose from a rough, grit-tested upbringing in a tough neighborhood of Boston to become a four-time global C-suite executive and a sales leader at Google. He achieved possibly the ultimate corporate dream, but at 40 years old, the pressure caught up to him, and he found himself flatlining in a hospital bed. That terrifying moment of tragedy became his ultimate catalyst for triumph. Chris survived. He threw out the old playbook of the grind and developed a revolutionary 5-step framework to help others stop playing defense. He's a certified professional coach and author of the powerhouse new book, Balls and Brains, a framework for living your best life by overcoming fears and maximizing strength. Chris Woods, welcome to the 5am podcast.
Thanks very much, Michael. I appreciate you having me, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Absolutely. Now, you grew up in a tough area of Boston, perhaps a real life Goodwill Hunting environment. And Boston is often the backdrop to so many films and TV series. How did that early environment shape your initial relationship with fear and your drive to succeed?
So I think that it definitely instilled fear, but also the habit of just pushing beyond it. So I often tell people that my dad died when I was 2. I'm the youngest of 5. So I saw the aftermath. My mom, who hadn't worked, I had to get a driver's license and then find work. And so she ended up becoming a cleaning lady in motels around Boston. And I just saw, her resilience and her grit was, if bad things happen, no one really wants to hear you complain. You just gotta suck it up and get it done. So, I was surrounded by that type of mentality. And fortunately, I was able to, I was gifted with, some intelligence. So I was able to combine the grit and the resilience that the environment provided with the intelligence that I think my parents provided.
Nice. That's good. Yes. And some people will say to us, suck it up, buttercup. And often
Sure.
we can respond with, I'm all out of suck it up. I don't have any left. So that means that we need maybe a bigger capacity or a bigger reservoir to store all that suck it up juice in there. How did you looking back, how did you maybe say, oh yeah, I was definitely building some resilience? Can you maybe tell us of a time where looking back now you think, well, that was a really good moment for me, as hard as it was at the time?
Yeah, I think that one of the things was trying to grind to get work and get jobs when I was in high school. That it was just jobs were hard to come by, but I ended up just knocking on a lot of doors and ended up, finding jobs and just driving some sort of an income so that I felt like I was, I had some money in my pocket and I could help my mother out. So I think that the first kind of official jobs that I found, whether it was just walking around and knocking on people's doors and asking if I could clean their front yard, or ended up, getting a job bagging groceries. You're supposed to be 16, but I forged it and I got it when I was 14. That I think that those initial ones of just showing the initiative of finding a way to get things done were the first ones that I could really draw a circle around. Hey, there's no free handouts here.
There's no free handouts. You got to pay your way. And you clawed your way up from those streets to the highest echelons of the corporate world, including that leadership at Google. So from the outside, people might say, man, that Chris, man, he's got it made. And you look back, how much of that relentless climb was driven by inspiration, and maybe how much was it driven by you trying to outrun maybe memories or experiences of the past?
So I realized afterwards that the vast majority of it was driven by fear. So I flatlined, and they, then said, we're installing a pacemaker in your chest. It ended up being cardiac Lyme disease. So they ended up having to treat that. And then after
Wow.
that was cleared, they said, you probably get another 50 years ahead of you. So I was like, all right, so how do I want to spend the next 50 years differently than, the first 40? And it gave me the opportunity to look back on it and say, how have I been running? And fear was definitely 95% of it. And in fairness, it was things that I just picked up in my environment and then self-installed
Hmm.
and was just running off of that for the longest time. And it seemed to be working, and it did, in a lot of ways. But then when I was blessed with the opportunity to now get a second chance and to be able to look at what I want to be able to do it differently, I hoped that there would be a better way than of it being so fear driven. So that's what started off my journey on that. And so it started off on the fears part of it, as well as I also had then been given an executive coach at Google. And so she helped me, kind of put a mirror up to some of my blind spots. But one of the things that she also had me do was take a Clifton's Strength Finder. So it's
Oh,
for people in your audience that aren't aware of it, it's an online diagnostic test that you take you about 40 minutes, and it gives you out the top 5 and 10 top strengths that you have. And so when I looked at that, I compared that to what I was doing at work. Now, when I had joined Google originally in 2006, it was still kind of entrepreneurial. And by the time I started getting ready to leave around 2013, it had grown into a much bigger corporation with like 180,000, people. And as a result of that, they needed to run things more structurally and formatted. So there was less room for the creativity that it had when I originally got there. So the Clifton Strength Finder also gave me the opportunity to be like, this is stuff that you fit better in, which was more entrepreneurial and turnarounds. So that led me about seeing about the fears part of it and leaning into strengths to say, this is how I want to spend these next decades.
right. And so then looking back, so whether it was that time of that mirror, metaphoric mirror, the executive coach was holding up in front of you, is there some things when you looked back through that time and you thought, oh man, I didn't realize the fuel for this particular moment was actually fear. I thought it was X, Y, and Z. Was there some of those memories that popped up?
I think so. And it she gave me the opportunity when she provided me with like feedback that I got like 360-degree feedback from people that, worked with me. And they would be like, these are the things that he does really well. And then these are some of the other things that maybe, he can work on. And I had never seen, I'd never heard of that. And it was a lot of those were things that I would just like, I would push through on things as
Mm,
opposed to say waiting for the group to kind of, to catch up or try to
yes.
incorporate a lot of people's feelings and opinions on it. I was like, we don't have time for this. Let's go. Let's get this done. So that putting up that mirror to me was like, oh, okay. So I was doing this and it was working, but I was just steamrolling my way through, as opposed to this is a more kind of self-aware way to approach work.
Yes. So the kind of the blunt force trauma, as I
Yeah,
might call it, trying to get through. We got to get this
that's
project
right.
done. So what I had to learn was the scalpel, not the chainsaw or sledgehammer or
Ah.
both. Did you find then that it actually led you to help maybe build better teams or use your team a little bit more for their specialties?
For sure, as well as an understanding on that Clifton's Strength Finders, the importance of that, of being able to then have my teams take it too, so that
Mm.
it also unveiled where people were really strong and to be able to empower them to be doing more things that play to their strengths.
Yes. I worked with a very experienced TV broadcast news guy. And we were in 2 different departments at this station, and I kept seeing people complaining about his failures, and I was trying to talk to leadership about my observation that the reason your man Darren here, we'll just call him that, is failing is because you're giving him the jobs outside of his talents and abilities. Was there a realization that you had maybe about a team member or yourself was like, wow, I totally have the wrong hat on?
Yes. So that was eventually what prompted me to then leave Google, because when I got there initially, it was a lot of room for creativity and to, I got there before they bought YouTube, and then they bought YouTube the next year, and then people were just figuring out how to sell it. So it was up to sales people to kind of
Mm.
figure it out. So it was great. And I was able to then do that and sell some of the, their original big deals on it. And it was just generally a lot of flexibility on it. And the Clifton's Strength Finder showed on it, they said, you belong in an entrepreneurial environment where, it's all, you're starting it up, or a turnaround where you can go in and there's something that needs to be fixed and you've got the creativity to kind of do that. So that's what I did. So I left Google to originally start a CEO consulting business where I could go in and help CEOs with that. And then I was eventually recruited by investors to go turn around an
Mm.
advertising technology company that had been around for like 7 years, but had fallen on hard times. So I then ended up doing that type of turnaround thing 4 times. And so it really felt good to be in those types of environments where I could go in and fix things, as opposed to you, this is your job, you stay in that lane. So it was a real eye-opening experience for me, because not only it showed me that on black and white paper, but it was also at a stage in my career where I could pick that, you know,
Mhm.
that I know I had originally been in more corporate settings, and that now that I have the gift to be able to kind of choose my own adventure on it, that has made all the difference in the world.
Yes. Man, I love those books. Choose Your Own Adventure. They were
Yeah.
great. Thanks for the retro thought there for a
Yes.
second. The turnaround opportunities that you had, could you actually find similarities when you went in to turn something around and you're like, "Ah, there's your problem. Your dad
For
never
sure.
bought you a dog. That's it." Can you talk a little bit about that?
What I found most of the time was that it was the same founder and executive team for the most part of the ones who had created the company from
Mm.
startup to later stage. And so they had been in it from the very beginning with all the good and the bad that comes with that. And so when investors would bring me in with a fresh set of eyes, as well as with a mandate to be able to fix things, and again, not going necessarily with the
Mhm.
chainsaw, but to
Yes.
be able to be, find the right balance to bring people along on these things. It ended up being something that it was like, I could then see it with fresh eyes. They're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't seen that at all. And so it was really invigorating for me to be able to go in and know that I was making an impact that they were appreciating.
Right. That makes a lot of sense too, and probably a parallel to your experience and your transition. Why do you think that so many high achievers might find themselves trapped in a life that it looks good, but the financials aren't matching up to the feelings and it doesn't feel good?
So I think, and what I see oftentimes in a lot of my clients is they set these goals and these achievements based on a 15, the version of them when they were 15 or
Yeah.
20 or 22, right? And then they do these things and then they're late 20s, they're in their 30s, sometimes even in their early 40s, and they've started to achieve some success. And then they're scared witless about losing it. Right. So that they'll
Yeah.
say, even though this kind of sucks, but I'm just going to kind of keep doing it for the money. And this isn't totally great, but at least it's a job. And what if I try something else and it all goes, poof? And so what I try to then, recommend to people is that you don't have to like blow up your whole life on these things. If there's a sense here that there is a misalignment and that, it can be better, that's your heart and soul telling you that it's true. And I'm
Mhm.
not telling you, if you're an accountant, to blow up your life and become a painter. It's
Yeah.
more like what I always say to people is like, let's then set an evolution as opposed to a revolution, because revolutions are disruptive and messy and scary, and oftentimes they don't work, whereas evolutions are natural. And
Yeah.
so that's the thing that I end up helping people with. And particularly, I work with a lot of men that at least the ones I work with, tend to catastrophize. They're like, oh my God, if I do this, I'm
Yes.
going to lose it all. And I'm
Right.
like, you're not, you won't. And I'm not going to let you.
Yes. Well, and to your earlier statement and point, I think if an accountant wanted to become an artist, they would do best with paint by number, probably.
There.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So before your health crisis, what was your personal definition of success? And looking back, has that or was that definition maybe secretly exhausting you?
So what I would say is there's the number one part of my definition of success is the same before and after, and
Oh,
that's my role as a father. So I've got two daughters now who are 25 and 21. My 25-year-old just officially became a doctor 3 days
wow.
ago. And then
Nice.
my youngest just graduated from undergrad last weekend. So before and after, dad is still the number one thing. But then I'd say the pre 40 was achievement and um, kind of resume or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Whereas afterwards, now it's feeling aligned and feeling like what I'm doing is what I'm actually meant to be doing. And so I'm now at the point where my work is actually who I am, as opposed to I'm going in to work and I'm putting on a work
Mhm.
hat. And then at the end of the day, I'm taking my hat off. You know what I mean? So I've now gotten to the point where I'm the same person in all aspects of my life. And I think that that enables me to be really authentic for my clients.
Mhm.
Whereas pre flatline, I was still running on fear, achievement, and feeling like, a giant clock was ticking in my ear.
Right. So for you, at 40 years old, that check engine light came on, and I guess it didn't actually just come on, the engine completely stopped. Can you take us back into that hospital room of what goes through the mind of this high-powered executive when it feels like, oh man, was I ignoring this check engine light, or all of a sudden it comes down to the wire?
Yeah, so when I came to after the flatline was a very strange feeling because I could hear all the doctors in the room, but I couldn't see anybody and I couldn't actually speak.
Mm.
And so I could hear them and I heard them say, all right, we've got a heartbeat now and we have this. And I wanted to be able to say, all right, guys, I'm back. Here I am. Here I am. But it took a while for me to be able to actually communicate. I had the awareness without being actually able to say anything or like even open my eyes, I don't think. And so then once I did, and they were like, Mr. Woods, you know what just happened here? You flatlined for a minute and 4 seconds. We're going to need to keep you in the hospital for a while. Then I was in the hospital for like 3 weeks while they were running tests and eventually installed the pacemaker. So I had some time to, start coming to grips with what had happened. And then when they then said, all right, we've identified it and here now you should be good. We fixed you and you're good for your next,
Yeah.
500,000 miles. That it was a massive relief that I was like, okay, this could have
Mhm.
gone the other way. And, my kids would be growing up without a dad and, my life would be over. So now I really felt like I had a second chance at it. And now that I do, what do I want to do differently? Knowing that my first priority still remains my kids, but how can I be a better, less fear-driven version of myself?
And so did you ever get a reason as to why, or was it an activity you were doing at the time that your heart stopped?
Sure. So I had an existing condition that had happened every once in a while. It's called vasovagal syncope, where
Oh,
sometimes if you have like a physical trauma, your blood pressure will drop and you can lose consciousness for like 5 seconds. And it happened to me like 4 times over my life. One time I banged my elbow playing wiffle ball on the street,
wow.
like on a manhole cover. And I started, seeing stars and I passed out. So they said that what ended up happening to me was it was a sinister vasovagal. So instead of just my blood pressure dropping, my heart
Mm.
stopped. And so
Wow.
what brought it on is I was bitten in the back by a tick, which carried cardiac Lyme disease.
Okay.
And so that's what ended up injuring my system. So that's how my body responded to it, was just shutting down.
Wow. And totally not something I did not have that on my bingo card to get bit by a tick and have this happen and totally out of your control.
For sure.
When you woke up and you realized that I think I've just been handed a second bingo card, second chance at life, was there a first internal boundary or rule that you wanted to change immediately?
It was changing my mindset to be more living in gratitude as
Mm,
opposed to scarcity. And so, I couldn't totally articulate that, but that's what it was leading me towards. And that's
mhm,
how, I live now. And that's what set me down the road on all these things. And this is the thing I say to everybody is that I think that this is the greatest gift somebody could give to themselves. And this is why I always say to people is you don't have to flatline in the hospital bed at 40 to
right.
benefit from some of these things that I'm now sharing with others.
Mhm,
And first and foremost is the practicing of gratitude because it changes, the way that you see life. But then the other two things, and the reason why I wrote the book Balls and Brains, is identifying the fears that you have that are holding you back from living the full authentic version of yourself. And
mhm.
then identifying your strengths and going all in on them. What I always say is like, let's go full offense on your strengths as opposed to playing defense on your weaknesses. Because when you're playing defense on the weaknesses, it adds to the fear and it adds to the unhappiness and it feels like, you're never getting ahead and you're not enough.
Right. Man, so many places we could jump off to. And I love the rabbit trails because that seems to me always where the authentic conversation comes out. And I noticed you've got some tattoos, and I was just curious, did those tattoos happen before or after your flatline experience?
After. So the first one I got, which hold on, let me see how I can turn my arm here. You can see
Oh,
here,
yes. There you
yeah,
go.
there's the heartbeat and the flat line coming back up. So that was the first one I got. And then I built the rest of these around it. And it's really meant to, these are all things that mean, a lot to
Mhm.
me about my life. One of them is
Yeah.
about, this one's the father-daughter, not the eternal bond between dads and
Right.
daughters. So I won't bore you with the rest of them,
No,
but
no, that's
no,
good.
they ended up happening afterwards.
Yes. Well, sometimes we need to mark those occurrences that happen and that shake us up and put us on a new path. And it's so valuable to be able to mark what has happened. And even coming from a Christian perspective of myself, knowing the Bible talks about people being marked because of what has happened or what will happen and their identity. And identity is such a wonderful thing. When you think back of who you would have said Chris Woods is this. And now how would you finish that sentence versus back then?
I'd say that I am here as a servant to help my fellow humans reconnect with their divine nature.
Yeah, that's good. And fears is just one of, I put the S on the end for, because there's a lot of them. There's not just one, there seems to be a whole bucket list of fears as well as the opposite. What would you say then? And I think you probably said it without saying it in that last answer. For you, what is the opposite of fear?
Love.
Yeah.
So it's love and faith. And, this is the thing that I say about the two major parts about the overcoming fears and maximizing strengths is this is so aligned with, having an authentic connection to God is
Hmm.
that God doesn't want you to be fearful, right? So, I mean, it's repeated in the Bible
Yeah.
for all the things like, do not fear. And that is a thing that if you can reconnect to feeling, your safety and your connection to the divine,
Yeah.
that's a way to really lose the fear that has built up over the years. And then your strengths, this is what God gave you. And
Hmm.
so there was a quote that I always remembered, and it was de Sales, Saint Francis de Sales. And he was like, he said, be yourself and be that well, so that you may bring honor to the master craftsman whose handiwork you are.
Nice.
And I love that because we build up over the years of living, fear as well as shame and trying to keep ourselves smaller and to be able to give people the permission to reconnect to their divine nature, the gifts that they were given
Mhm.
is to move away from living in fear and living in faith and love.
Yeah, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, as we're talking, I want to remind you we have that comment section. We love to read the comments, see who's commented, and we thank you for that. Perhaps you want to document something that you have of why you got a tattoo, of what you were going through at that time in your life. And you're like, I need a permanent record of what just went down. And we'd love to hear that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, while you're thinking about a comment to leave or an experience, maybe you don't even want to write it down, but it's rolling around in your brain right now. Chris, how can people get in touch with you and find out about your book?
So I have a very simple name. It's Chris Wood. So Chris, Chris, Woods with an S. People used to always say growing up, it sounded like a fake name because it was so short, but it's true. So my name is Chris Woods and I'm a coach. So my website is just chriswoodscoach.com. And so there you can see how I work with clients. You'll see testimonials from people who've had great experiences. There's a link to my book, Balls and Brains, on Amazon, as well as there's a way to message me directly. So if anything that I've said today has resonated
Mhm.
with people and they're interested in connecting, please just go to chriswoodscoach.com.
Awesome. Yes. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll have that in the description and show notes and all that. Chris, was there one of those fears that just seemed like it did not want to let go and you kept having to beat it off with a stick?
Yeah, I think that it was things that despite the fact that I was doing and continued to do kind of seemingly big stage things, I still had a fear of going all in and publicizing my coaching business and brand. Because for the last 4 years when I've been doing it, it's all been on referral. So I work with people and then they have a good experience and they tell other
Yeah.
people. And I hadn't been doing any marketing about it. And so the book, once I had written the book and decided to publish it, I was like, what I need to do is actually go out and share it with people. And the intention is to try to get this in people's awareness so that I can positively impact as many people as
Yeah.
possible. So that's what got me then start doing podcasts where I can connect with people who are all over the country and all over the world. But, the little voice in my head for the longest time kept saying is like, "Well, you sure you want to do this? Like, you really want to put yourself out there and do that?" And so I am now 99% confident with it, but there's
Yeah.
always still that one little part of it is that says to me, like the scared 15-year-old version of me is like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. I totally get it. I totally get it. Probably one of my fears is I like to get things started and it's finishing it
Oh,
and just
really?
making sure it's finished and then not being a perfectionist about it and knowing that it needs to get done and yeah, stop trying to make it perfect. Just
Yeah.
send it off. Now, your book has a no nonsense title, Balls and Brains. In we'll use the word framework because it's in fashion right now. In your framework for the book, what does balls represent when it comes to breaking free from that self-imposed limitations, and how do we balance that with the brain part?
So the balls part of it is fear, is gaining an awareness around the fears so that you can first have awareness and then we can overcome them. The brains part of it is not about being good in school or anything related to that. It's being smart about knowing what you're really good at and choosing consciously where you're going to put your effort into the things where you can go from good to great as opposed to, trying to just work to get average. So on the balls part of it, one of the things I say in the book is that it's an inside job. Whenever somebody says that person has balls, oftentimes I'll ask them, I'll be like, so why? So what is a person that you say has balls? So for example, somebody might say if a person has a fear of, say, stage fright or going up, they wouldn't be able to go up in front of hundreds or thousands of people. If they see somebody else do it, they'll say that person has balls. And so I often say that it's an inside job, that when you're projecting out that somebody has balls or courage, what is that telling you about what you fear? And so I named it and wrote the book mostly for a male audience, even though I work with
Mhm.
both men and women, is that it's meant to be an attention grabber for men, as well as an accessible way for them to start having a conversation about that. And it's not meant to be like, I'm going to sit you down on a therapy couch. It's more just like, you could be better. Right. And it's like, as opposed to just pushing through, like we said at the beginning, you're just sucking up on things. Imagine how much better you could be if you had, kind of addressed these things. So what I use, and this is what I always say to everybody, and this is free because I didn't come up with it, but I
Yeah.
love it. It's from a guy named Peter Crone, who's a British guy who's kind of spiritual, kind of a life coach. And he uses this question. He says, who would you be in the absence of your concerns?
Hmm.
And so I love that question exactly how it's phrased because he doesn't say, what are your concerns? What are your fears? And even he just uses the word concerns, which is different than fears too, right? And he
Yeah.
said, who would you be in the absence of your concerns? So I encourage everybody to ask themselves that question and be honest, as you will
Mhm.
be, and write it down too, because it opens up, I think, this part in your mind and in your heart about who I could be, how I'd feel, how I would operate on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis, and what my life could be if I didn't have these concerns. And just doing that exercise is such a great starting point because I didn't put that in you. Nobody else did. That's a question that your soul just responded to you about what's available to you. And let's just start with that.
Yeah, that's good. And you also talk about the 5 step that you created from your lived experience. What are the two most common things you see holding people back from stepping into their fullest potential?
It's the first two. So it's fear, it's limiting fears that they have
Hmm.
and all the reasons they tell themselves that they can't or shouldn't. And it's an unnatural way to live in a lot of ways. So it's natural in that, fear is in all of us and it's meant to keep us safe and it's ego driven and it's worked for thousands of years to keep,
Yes.
the genes into the next generation. But now at this point where you've got the ability and privilege to be able to look at it, it's like, you know what? I don't want to flatline at 40 or die at 40 with
Yeah.
regrets. It's like, how could you live a more authentic life? And what are those fears that hold you back from doing that? Because if you didn't, you'd go all in.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's the first thing I'd say. And then the second thing is getting in touch with what you're really good at and going all in on it. So when I say back about this Clifton Strength Finder, or even ones you can do, other ways, or even do it through work, is you were put on earth with a set of talents and it's meant for you to actually, cultivate that. And the amazing thing is when you can free yourself from fears and go more all in on your strengths, you're
Yeah.
living in flow. And what I say to people is I use a lot of these kind of analogies and comparisons, is that it can help you go from feeling like you're in a rowboat, right? So it's all on you. It's manual labor. You're making progress, but it's exhausting. And as soon as you stop, your progress stops. But there's a way you can move it into a sailboat. So
Hmm.
you're going to transverse the water more quickly, more efficiently. You're still guiding, you're still deciding the direction you want to go, but it's not all on you, right? You're
Yeah.
leveraging the other things that are available to you. In that case, the wind and God and nature, but then also like how can you be using a different set of skills that's not brute force?
Yeah. That's good. And you were talking about stop playing defense and stop maybe working out of your weaknesses and start playing some offense on their strengths. And a former Chicago Blackhawks coach, hockey coach that I worked with fairly often, we got to know each other quite well. He had told me once, Michael, we can either outplay our opponent or we can exploit their weakness. Those are the two ways we can win. We don't have a lot of other options. And so for someone who's, they're afraid to make a mistake, so they're so focused on I got to fix these flaws. How do they make that practical shift into playing to a strength instead of trying to fix themselves or have an expectation of failure?
So what I'd say is we all have quote unquote weaknesses that do need our attention. And so, that's on the blind spots that's a thing that you can find out that you need to be better at. But I discourage people from putting a disproportionate amount of effort into fixing these things as opposed to going all in on their strengths. So
Hmm.
what I would say is it should be more like 80% of your time on your strengths,
Yeah.
20% on quote unquote weaknesses. But what I say on that, on the weaknesses and even the fears, they only have to be ones really that are negatively impacting you. So what I say to people is
Hmm.
that like, I still
Okay.
have a fear of heights but it doesn't impact my daily life. So it's not like I'm a window washer or something like that. So
Yes.
I don't have to address all of my fears or all of my weaknesses. I just needed to address the ones that are limiting me and holding me back from being the best possible version of myself. So
Yeah.
I try to then do that when we're talking about fears. And one thing I haven't mentioned is part of the fears part of it. I also have people take a personality test called an Enneagram, and that will also give you not only feedback on your personality, but how fear shows up for you. And so when we map the Enneagram, personality and fears, and the Clifton Strength Finders, wherever there's fears that are holding you back from going all in on the strengths, that's when we
Hmm.
really want to lean into. So for example, with me, one of the ones was I was holding back that I didn't want to fail or have public embarrassment. But
Yeah.
my strengths were I should be out, you know, helping people or turning around companies or doing these other things. So I needed to reconcile that as opposed to like what I used to always say in sales, I was really good at making deals, but I wasn't very good at keeping track of things in like Salesforce CRM.
Yeah.
And whereas companies would then still make me do it, when I was then in charge as a chief revenue officer, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to make my top salespeople do the stuff that they're not really that good at just because it's important. I'll have someone else do it for them. That way I can free them up to go full offense on
Mhm.
their strengths, which actually is going to help the company too.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Being able to let someone build their own team so that they can succeed. And one of the things that my wife and I talk about, mainly from experience, is how the leadership has a much different responsibility than they think they do when it comes to their people, of helping them succeed, giving them the tools to succeed actually sometimes means paying for an assistance for them so that
Exactly.
they can actually do those high stakes things that they're really good at, and then the assistant actually loves it because they're learning something. They don't even have to be star players. Your key people love it because all of a sudden, all these burdens that nag them through their week just fall off. And it's great.
That's exactly right, Michael. That's exactly right. And that's even what I say then to people if we extend it about their lives is, in this day and age, you can outsource a lot of things. So a
Yes.
lot of things that either take up a lot of time or you're just not really good at. So that's a secondary thing. But that's the idea is I try to get people to spend as much time as possible
Mm.
in work and in life
Mhm.
in their genius zone, right? So that they're
Yes.
playing to their strengths and the stuff. Everybody has to do some things that they don't really like to do. But how do I get you to be playing at least 80% of your time to your strengths?
Oh, that's good. Okay, so here's a great example of this. It's kind of weird, but I had this. He was very talented. He had his own things, just like we all do. His vehicle was in the shop. He needed me to come pick him up. We were going to our project that we were working on. And he said, Mike, I got to stop at the laundromat. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, I don't do my own laundry. I get them to do it. And they fold it and everything for me. And I was like, that's actually kind of brilliant. And that's just one of those things you can take off the list, have somebody else do your laundry for you. You have
For
house
sure.
cleaners.
Think
Yeah.
about how much time that saves him
Oh.
during the week, or just like
Mhm.
that's the other thing is like so many times if people have a very busy work week and then have to then jam other things they need to do onto weekends, for example.
Yes.
It's like those things that you would normally do on the weekends, can you outsource them to
Totally.
somebody else so that you can actually have a real weekend?
Yes. Yeah, just like grocery shopping after
Right.
work, so you don't have to do it on Saturday or
That's
Sunday.
right.
Yes, it's one it's
Right. But
you
all of this
see.
starts with awareness, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
right.
that's what I always say, and it's like so that's what I said about the fears part of it and the strengths part of it is I bet you don't have a strong awareness about both of these things. You might. So let's actually engage on that and get some data. That's why I have people do the Enneagram and have the Clifton Strength Finders.
Mm,
And then so, we mentioned the 5 steps. All we've been talking about really is the fears and then the
yeah.
strengths. So what I then end up doing with people is, all right, now that we've established these things, let's now take a fresh look at your goals. And they could be now the same as they were, are they going to be different? And it's just how different are they? Based on now this more empowered view that we're at. And
Mhm.
like, I don't want you to hold back. I want you to have these big goals and then we'll set ways to get it. And then the last 2 parts is where the real rubber meets the road. And I'm sure you've experienced this. And this is where sometimes people fall down is you get really excited that it's now this whole, new bright horizon in front of you. It comes down to altering mindset and daily habits. And that's the hard stuff, right? So that's the stuff that you end up having
Mm.
to work on to reprogram these neural pathways and these habits of thought and habits of actual habits that have been built up for the longest time, and to make them actually work for you. And so that ends up becoming the less sexy part of it, but the really only way that any of this change takes hold.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And it's the moment when somebody actually gets it and the light bulb goes on. And I'll get you to speak to that in a moment, but I gotta revisit the laundromat thing because the light came on for me because I was like, at first I thought he actually wanted to do his laundry. So I was ignorant of the services that this
Right.
husband and wife had at this laundromat that I had driven by countless times. And I I went in with them and I was like, they got a checklist. This is so easy. I drop my clothes off, I fill this out, and they come back to me clean and folded, and all I have to do is put them away. So the light bulb went on. I finally got it. And what is that transformation that you see in a client look like when you're like, ah, man, the light switch just went on and he's got it?
I see it happens first, when we finish the first two sections around the fears and the strengths, and then they can reset goals, is because they're like, wow, I wouldn't have set this goal because this
Hmm.
limiting fear would hold me back from it. Or now generally I'm really excited about this and I'm like really invigorated about these things that I want to do because it's aligned with who I am. And so that's the first thing. And you just see them, their energy is just different on it. And then it's like it goes up and then it goes down when they end up having to rework the mindset and the habits
Hmm.
because, as a coach, as I'm sure you know, it's like I'm only working with somebody once a week as well as, I can connect with them, but they're with themselves 24/7.
Yeah.
So it's like they need to stay on top of these things. And it's so easy for any of us to just fall
Yes.
back into old habits,
Right.
old mindset habits and then old actual real habits. And that's the part where once people stick with it and they start to see the changes and they can map the progress that they've had, that's the real change because then they were like, holy mackerel, this isn't just, a dream. This
Yeah.
isn't just like something that I thought was great, but now I probably can't get this done. When they actually then see it taking root and their lives are changing and they're a
Hmm.
different person because of it, that becomes the flywheel that they're like, oh, this is great. And then fortunately, when that sticks and then they're different, they had such a great experience that this is where I end up getting my referrals because
Hmm.
then they're out to beers with a buddy
Yes.
and they're telling him how great things are going. And they're like, oh, I've been working with this guy, Chris Woods. So that has been how my business has been running for the last few years. But as I said to you, the fear that I had was actually then marketing my business to people
Hmm.
beyond just the ones who are happy customers.
Yes. Well, speaking of marketing, have you heard of Rory Sutherland?
No.
Is this British marketing guy. The only reason I wanted to bring him up because he had this brilliant idea that I think Mrs. 5M podcast and I have to do in our kitchen. He actually suggested getting two dishwashers with the magnets that say clean and dirty. And you never put your dishes in the cupboard. You just move them out of the clean dishwasher, use them, put them in the dirty dishwasher. And then once it's full, start the cycle.
That's hysterical.
Yeah. I was like, "Man, that is brilliant. I never knew that I needed 2 dishwashers, but
No.
dagnammit, I do now." Yeah, so for the person that's listening and also has never thought of having 2 dishwashers, but they feel like they're caught in the grind culture. They're waking up tired, they're working around the clock, they're not having someone do their laundry or their dishes, and they're burning out. What are those top 3 things that they can do today to improve the quality of their life?
So the first thing is ask themselves that question, who would I be in the absence of my concerns? And write
Mhm.
down the answer and take a look at it. The
Yeah.
second thing is take an inventory of your strengths and an honest look about how much of your life you're spending using them. And know that it doesn't necessarily, if you're only using a little bit of them, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to quit your job and start from scratch. There are ways that you can evolve your current gig as well as start to do things outside of work hours that play to your
Mm.
strengths and you'll feel a
Mhm.
lot more aligned with what you're here on earth to do. And then the third part of it is if you don't do it already, depends upon what people's relationships are with God and their own religion. I say just generally is you cannot be practicing gratitude enough. And the idea on doing that is building that habit of not only just in the morning and at night, but even during the day, of what you're noticing is as opposed to the ego and fear driven mind that's always looking for what's wrong. But it's hard to override that because we need to still be doing that and live in the world. But if you can retrain your mind to be grateful and all the things that you're grateful for, you'll see more of them and you'll attract more of them.
Yeah.
And that is, this key to life that people have known for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And I'm not, I didn't just discover this, but it's wild because we as humans forget it. And it's how we,
Yes.
we forget our connection to God and we live in fear and we don't pay attention to our strengths. So doing both of those things all feed into the idea of practicing gratitude because it has a authentically impactful transformational impact on your mindset and your life.
Mhm. Man, that's good words. I was gonna ask you for any parting thoughts, but I think we just got them. And what a blessing it is to have you on the 5 a.m. podcast today. And what a powerful reminder too that it's never too late to redefine success and drop that baggage of fear and start playing offense with the life we've been given. So, Chris, thank you so much for your experience and for sharing that with us today.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you again for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh yeah, it was a delight. One thing that I was thinking of as you were talking, old books, of course, that I love old books and reading old books. And there's a verse in the Bible that, it's so much different than it was 1,000 years ago. It's Mark 11:24. And in the Wycliffe Bible, it actually says, if you speak out to something, it will come running to you.
Yeah.
And you were talking about that word attract, and it gets so pigeonholed into one thing. People say, "Oh, law of attraction," or this or that method and mindset, but it's just such a universal truth, the way creation's been set up that yeah, go ahead if you wanna
So I
talk about.
could not agree more. And one of the things that I also have picked up over the years is that law of attraction is universal and real. But what I also say is that God and the universe don't necessarily hear the word not. So
Mm,
if you are focusing on the things you don't want, oftentimes you'll find that you'll attract it because the
yes,
universe doesn't understand the not part of it. All it
that's right.
understands is that, is the energy behind that. And so there's countless examples of that. But that also now comes back to the whole idea of your lens and gratitude. So as
Yes,
opposed to this negative lens and you're looking, I don't want that. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want that time. I don't
yes.
that thing, it's low energy and it's going out.
Mhm,
That thing is out there and you'll attract it.
totally.
Whereas if your mindset all the time is, thank you for this, I love this, I love this, I love this, that
Yeah,
radiates more of these things. And one of the things that it was a story someone told me years ago. And they said, just think about God or the universe, however you want it, about if you're not grateful, if you're not practicing gratitude, right? They want to be giving you things and they're
mhm,
constantly giving you things. And if you think about you yourself, Michael, if you are then constantly giving gifts to a handful of people, the people who are saying thank you every time you give gifts, you're feeling good and you want to keep giving them gifts. The people that you keep giving gifts to and they never say thank you and they're always thinking about what's not enough, you're
yeah,
like, I don't really want to keep giving this person more gifts. And so I always thought about that as like, be a grateful gift recipient.
yes, yes, absolutely. And instead of, I will say friends, this is from learned experience. Instead of asking because you have a deficiency or a negative, you're thankful and grateful for what you currently have. And because God hears that you're grateful for your little and you're being faithful with your little, there's a whole lot more coming your way. And we are created by a creator to be creative. And God spoke with his voice and vibration that came out, and that's how we get to do it. And so we can create good delights or we can create terrible, difficult days that we have to learn from.
That's right.
So,
We're here to be joyous creators.
yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. What a great conversation.
Same. Thanks again for having me, Michael. This has been great.
Oh, yes. And so, 5 a.m. community, you're listening in. We appreciate you being here. Maybe you're tired of playing small. And if you're exhausted from the grind that is not those morning coffee beans and it's not fulfilling you, it's time to get your coffee of balls and brains. Stop letting the hidden fears dictate your ceiling or shackles. As the case may be, head over to chriswoodscoach.com. Don't forget that S. There you can grab a link to his book. You can explore his game changing 5 step framework. You can check out the testimonials that are there and learn how you can work with Chris to directly build a life that feels as good as it looks. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. If you're thinking that your buddy John or Alice needs to listen, yeah, that's your sign. Send them this link, share this episode with them, and maybe you'll make work life balance a little bit better. Thank you for being here. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we seize our days, we seize our futures. So get out there, enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those beautiful adventures in between. I'm Michael Clausen, and I will see you on the next 5 a.m. podcast. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com.